A truck driver is facing charges after a woman was hit and killed on I-25 early New Year's Day. This happened just after midnight. Thornton police say the woman was riding with friends in a rideshare car when she got sick inside the car. Police say the rideshare driver then pulled over on I-25, at which point the woman and her friends paid for the ride and got out. According to the police, the woman then walked onto the highway and was sideswiped by a truck driver who then kept going. She was then hit by a second car as she was lying in the road. Police arrested the driver of the truck for investigation of a hit and run involving death. The driver of the rideshare was not charged with a crime.
Leaving an individual who doesn't feel well off on the side of an interstate highway is certainly morally reprehensible, and it also could well give rise to civil liability.
Police have not yet released the name or the age of the woman who was sadly killed. Now, this hit and run has a couple of different parts to it. So to break this down is our 9 News legal analyst, Whitney Traylor. And Whitney, there are 2 cars that hit this woman here in this case that we're talking about, but only the first driver has actually been arrested.
Yes. You know, and that's interesting because this is almost like a law school exam. You know, the woman gets hit by one car, then gets hit by another car. Who's liable? The rideshare leaves her out. I mean, there were a bunch of very strange things about this. They charged the first driver, but the question that I have, and I believe I read this morning, the investigation is still going on, that who was actually killed her?
Right.
Was it the first driver or the second driver? So that may be, because as I understand it, she was hit and then was laying in the ground as the second car may have hit her. So those issues will come out. Who was actually responsible for the death? The first driver was charged with hit and run resulting in a death.
Right. So does that mean that the other driver of that second car could still be liable here?
I think so, because I think they're going to have to determine at what point she died and who was actually responsible, and if they can even find that second car.
Okay. Yeah. But what about the rideshare driver in all of this? Because a lot of people are hearing this story or they're reading it and they're saying, well, how would anybody even let you out on the highway in the first place? Could that driver be responsible too?
Now, that's a great question. And I think when the first questions, we were talking about criminal liability for the drivers. Right. Here, we would probably be talking about civil liability. And the question is, this is really a tort. And so for all the law students, they'll know these terms. And so with a tort, the question is, were you negligent? And so they go through an analysis of, did you have a duty? Did you breach that duty? Was that breach the cause of the actual damages? And so here the question is, did the driver have a duty to leave these people in a safe place? Right. And of course they did. Did the driver breach that duty? Well, it looks like he left them, or he or she left them near the highway. Now the question is, was that the cause of this accident?
Right.
And so there's factors there that we don't know yet, because it sounds like the group, there were 3 or 4 of them, paid for it, got out. How long did they walk? Where did they walk?
Some kind of an agreement that they were getting out, no pushback or anything that we know of, at least at this time.
And that will be part of the investigation. And I would not be surprised if there was a lawsuit, because even if there was some negotiation, hey, you threw up in my car, get out, or can you send us over here, drop us off right here?
Right.
Either way, if you're dropping somebody off on the highway, I think that is a breach of your duty.
Right.
I couldn't find anything in the rideshare sort of agreements, manual, if you will. But this, I definitely think the driver is cooperating, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a civil lawsuit.
Right, absolutely. So what happens next? Where do we go from here? Right.
So not only, you also have the driver, but then under agency principles, the actual rideshare may be liable as well, because they were the principal and the driver was the agent. So we have that. And then of course the investigation is going to be ongoing with regard to the criminal liability. And there you have the first driver for sure, and potentially the second driver. So there will be more of an investigation. The criminal case will proceed at least to the first driver, and I would expect civil action relatively soon.
Right. This case is heartbreaking to talk about and to hear about. You know, these girls seemed like they went out and had a fun time or having a good night, maybe on their way home, and then this all happened. What to you, from a legal standpoint, seems to stand out the most? Where would you be looking at here?
Honestly, the driver, just to drop them, the rideshare driver, that is actually where I'd like to see the facts and see what happened there, because and you have to think about it, that was the person who was responsible for them. They were in, you know, his or her custody, if you will. So they have the responsibility, they have the duty, they're trained, they're told when and where to drop people off. So that's where I'm going to really look to see the legal liability.
Right, because that also seems to have the most impact. A lot of us take ride shares. Are we going to be, you know, in safe hands with our drivers, or could we find ourselves in a very similar position? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and we normally see this where the driver, we've seen cases where there was assault, there were fighting, there was a sexual assault, those kind of things. So we see those kind of intentional acts, and that's also a tort. But here we're talking about negligence, because he didn't, you know, intentionally, I'm going to try and hurt you. But he had that duty, and the question is, did he breach it? So this will be setting precedent too, depending on how it goes.
All right, well, we'll see what happens from here. Whitney, thank you.
Good to be here.